You are what you eat. We've heard that so many times. And I don't know about you, but I absolutely love to eat. I love food. I love to fellowship with others around food. We've talked about that in other podcasts. But today I wanted to bring in a friend of mine, Devin Breedon, who is a dietitian with the Vital RD. And we want to have some good conversations about food and about how food affects the body. So, welcome, Devin. Devin, tell us a little bit about you. What brought you to where you are?
Well, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. So my background actually, when I was in school, I actually went to school to become a dentist. So my
Oh,
undergrad was actually focused on dental health and going into becoming a dentist. Grand scheme was to do that. Went to Michigan State. Focus was not on school as best it would be. I ended up diving into nutrition class as something as just an easy A, right? And it clicked, and there was a connection of like, what can I do with nutrition? So at that point, I switched into careers and became a dietitian, but it did take me going to grad school and getting a master's degree. So it was a long, enduring process. But most people don't have a story as to why they led to being a dietitian, or most have a story of why they led to being a dietitian, whether it's a history of dieting, eating disorders, maybe a family history of something that required nutrition. Mine really is just it was an interest in how to help
yeah.
people and understand it. But as I dive into my childhood, I realized I was raised as by a single mother, chronic dieter, but was really focused on home cooked meals, family cooked meals, and the importance of having meals at home and why it was so beneficial. So that's been ingrained in me as to why we can still prepare and eat food regardless of socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
So I've learned how to be a clinical dietitian. I've been doing this for 12 years and just gain an interest of helping people at different stages of life, taking in some of my experiences, but also seeing that the hospitals are overflowing with patients that have medical, chronic, new ailments that could be thwarted by nutrition and making changes to lifestyle. So
Right.
that's kind of
Yeah.
what led me to doing my own private thing. I left the bedside probably 2.5 years ago, went into sales, learned about sales, but realized that as a dietitian, I could sell what I do a little bit better than what I
Yeah.
was selling at the time. So it's important that this is kind of a full circle thing
Yeah,
for me.
food really does affect us in so many different ways. I mean, my husband, when he was younger, he was a little bit on the fluffier side, and as a teenager, he got tired of being made fun of, and went to his physician, and the physician put him on a diet that was so restrictive. He did lose the weight. He turned yellow. He maybe has long-term effects from that even then, like hair loss and things like that. And it was really truly devastating to him in that time in life. And so at any time, it can be devastating. I work a lot with people that are aging and seniors, as you know. And I get the questions all the time about, well, what can I eat to cure this problem? And you mentioned that in your notes that people say, tell me what I can eat to cure such and such. So, what do you say to them when they're coming and saying, hey, tell me what I can eat to cure diabetes or whatever?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is when people come to see me, oddly enough, a lot of people come to me because they want to lose weight. They're always like, I want to lose weight. And I always dive into like, what's your medical history? What's your family history? And come to find out that there's either borderline diabetes, there's heart disease. And they're like, well, I don't have those diagnoses. I'm not sick, but I don't want to have that
All
happen.
right.
I don't want to be a repeat of my family member. So people are realizing that when they make changes at that point and gradually make changes. You'd mentioned like your husband had been given like strict directions, right? And
Yes, at like 12 or 13.
there's the shock that comes with going from 100 miles an hour one direction and switching to another direction. And when that happens, some people will switch, but some people will get shocked and it's just too much. So the goal is that to gradually understand and educate people, because the biggest thing with nutrition, it's not really about the food, it's about understanding why it is what it is and what it does for us. So people will come to me and say, if I have diabetes, what do I do? So
Yeah.
the goal is to understand their basic knowledge of diabetes. What do they understand, right? And go from there, because my focus is more personalized. Like, okay, so you understand this. Okay, here's the basics. I'll go through the basics. They're like, okay, I don't understand that. Then we tie into lifestyle. Like, what do you do for work? Are you retired? Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a child that's in high school. Maybe it's a new career. Someone's just starting their career and they just graduated college and they've got type 2 diabetes, right? There's these different stages and different stressors in our life. So the biggest thing is everybody is not cookie cutter. And I think healthcare in a nutshell has been very cookie cutter. You have
Yes. Yeah.
diabetes. Here's a piece of paper for diabetes, cut out carbs,
Here's
right?
the guidelines.
Here's the
Yeah.
guidelines, right? And some people can do that. And some
Mm-hmm.
people need more adjust to what their life is,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
when it comes to the aging population, I can tell people how to eat, right? Can they physically do it, right?
Exactly.
Do they have
Can
the
they
ability?
prepare the food themselves? That's a good point.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier, just throw this one in, ADHD. It's talked about so much, and for some people, I know they say, "Oh, have coffee for ADHD, and that'll settle you down and help you to focus." And other people, it's like, "Don't have coffee at all." So, I mean, I guess it really is kind of a there's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, with a lot of things there isn't, right? Because obviously the caffeine mimics like the amphetamines, like if you were to take
Mm-hmm.
Adderall or
Mm-hmm.
things like that, right? It's mimicking that same effect. So yeah, sometimes with kids or children or adults that are hyperactive, they will self-medicate with caffeine because it will kind of take that edge off. Whereas people think caffeine will make you more energetic, right? Sometimes it kind of levels you out. But it is very personalized in how well we tolerate because certain people are more sensitive. Like one person can take a cup of coffee and they're jittery, one person can have a pot of coffee and feel nothing, right? And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
really based on
Yeah.
the body's ability. And a lot of it's genetics and how we digest things. So, and obviously the other things we're consuming on top of that because that plays a role. But with ADHD too, the biggest thing is, the hypervigilant nature. Sometimes kids will either skip meals, overconsume. If there is side effects, sometimes they're not eating their meals because they're not hungry because of
Mm-hmm.
certain medications, but they will go towards sugary or salty things because they're just all of a sudden they need to ravage, they need to eat something, so they're just kind of doing those things, so the health kind of gets affected from that.
Right.
What we're seeing obviously with ADHD is more a concern with obviously good healthful fats and protein in the diet. So once we start adding those things and avoid all the sugary things, because most people with ADHD will tend to overconsume sugary things, not all of them, but there's a correlation there. But once we start adding things in to kind of negate some of that sugar, we start seeing more of a benefit overall with health in general, like regarding focus and things like that.
That's interesting because I think that's an issue that I've had. It's really easy for me to grab sugary things and really salty things that are already fixed and prepared, and I don't need to sit down and like crack an egg open and scramble it and get some of those healthy fats and proteins. But I find I do much better when I do that. When I'll take the time to actually prepare something, and I see that with my children, they'll grab those sugars and the sweets because it's already prepared.
Yeah, there's benefits
Yeah.
when you have things structured, right? But with the ADHDs, the ADD type things, that it is hard creating structure at
Mm-hmm.
times because everything is very haphazard. So it's sometimes easy just to grab the things that are convenient because it is a process. Unless it's laid out there, it sometimes doesn't work. But yeah, when you do those things, you feel great. But it's work. It's work
Yeah,
getting to that
yeah.
point.
And speaking of that, we have a lot of clients that have dementia or early dementia, or maybe they are physically restricted from really being able to fix things. And so, again, being able to reach into the freezer and grab that pint of ice cream is a lot easier for them than fixing some kind of a meal. Do you have any thoughts on that? Any advice for people that are facing that?
I think the biggest thing is when people are limited to what they will consume or what they eat, right? We have
Hmm.
a world of supplements, protein shakes. I won't say any certain products, but obviously there's certain products out there that people may use when they're at home, right? But if there's a go-to like an ice cream and things like that, the amazing thing nowadays is we can make or mimic those things in other ways by recreating it. One tip I tell most people is you can make ice cream out of high protein options with a little bit of xanthan gum in it to actually mimic
Oh,
the thickness that would be
okay.
of ice cream. The amazing thing too is obviously I won't dive too much, but obviously with people with that may develop dysphagia or swallowing issues,
Yes.
that xanthan gum is actually in a lot of thickening agents that people would use in the hospital. So if you buy it in bulk or buy it on the internet, you could add it to most products and you could mimic the thickness of maybe a speech therapist has recommended that you follow. So I mean,
Oh,
and you take something they really enjoy, like ice cream, because ice cream sometimes is considered a thin liquid for someone who has dysphagia. So
right.
there's a way to add xanthan gum to thicken it to a point where it's considered nectar or honey thick, which is what a speech therapist may recommend. So I do that too on my own realm because sometimes I want ice cream, right? But what I'll
Mm-hmm.
do is I'll take a protein powder, mix it with some milk. I'll put it in the freezer with a little bit of xanthan gum. It will thicken like ice cream and make the same consistency. But there's not all the extra fat and sugar.
Shut the front door.
So there's
I'm
a way.
doing that.
So there's a way to do these things, and I think it's just shifting your mindset. And it requires 2 or 3 ingredients, right? It's not a lot of work. It's just having the plan to do it, right?
That's amazing because we do have a lot of patients that they can't eat like you and I can. They can't sit down to a gorgeous steak dinner with a nice side of broccoli on the side, right?
Yeah.
And so that part of life gets very mundane for them, and they lose a lot of joy because they can't eat anymore. So to be able to take something as simple as some milk and some protein powder, mix it with xanthan gum, and you could probably do, I don't know, fruits that way too.
You could blend
as
fruits
well,
in there. I mean,
and make
get crazy,
yourself
some
like
vegetables. I mean,
yeah.
you can make potentially a fruit and vegetable blended ice cream. So I mean, obviously the goal is to doctor and make it taste well, but yeah, there is ways to do things to where it doesn't feel so mundane and there's some more freedom there, right? But
I
yeah,
really like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we might have to look for some recipes and tag them in
Definitely.
this one. So, what are some of the important things to promote longevity of life? I've got some people in my life that are 101 years old. So obviously they did something along the way. Maybe they ate well, they slept well. But what are some things that you would recommend for us today to promote that longevity?
So the biggest thing is, diet is one big part of this, right? What we consume, and the focus is obviously diet patterns over time, right? We've got to start at a younger age that our focus is on longevity, right?
Yeah.
The mindset of being like, okay, I've got to address this before it becomes a concern, right? So
Yes.
the biggest thing is, when our foods become more processed, we're cutting a lot of the essential nutrients. And what happens is we start cutting out some good quality fat. And the biggest thing is, I think, if over the last 20, 30 years, there's been this shift of focus of fat being a concern, sugar being a concern, and we sometimes didn't know what to eat at times because the media would tell us this is bad for us, or our friend would say, hey, you shouldn't be eating that. But the biggest thing is we're seeing a benefit of following what I would say is potentially between a Mediterranean style eating and what's called the DASH diet. So somewhere in between, which is called it's called the MIND diet. So it kind of
Yep, I've
combines
seen that.
both of those things, right? So you eat Mediterranean style food, you've got, a lot of good fish, good fat, good oil, nuts and seeds, good omega-3s in your diet.
Right.
The omega-3s play a big role in brain function. So when you have those in your diet, it feeds into helping those things happen, right? And then you have fruits and vegetables, the fiber, the grains, the things that are whole grain feed the gut. So we're seeing a connection with the food that goes into your brain, but also the way that your gut works with your
Processes.
brain as well. So
Yes.
So gut health is very, very important for longevity, and obviously vascular disease. So salt intake, animal fats, some of the more processed fats, right? When those are in excess, and we don't replace them with good, healthful vegetable-based fats, we're going to see an increase in cholesterol, blood pressure.
Yes.
So the vascular type of dementias and memory concerns, right? Because we're restricting blood flow to the brain at that point. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
all these things.
My daughter and I were talking the other day too about she's trying to eat healthier and I'm trying to eat healthier, and she's studying Alzheimer's and the brain and the diet. And she said, I want to tell you guys to watch your sugar, because she's like, I'm seeing that diabetes has a direct correlation with Alzheimer's. And so just whatever you do, watch your sugar. And then she said, but unfortunately, it's in everything. And it literally is in everything. If you
Yeah.
want to have bacon, go ahead and try to find it without sugar in it, you know?
Yeah.
So tell me, so we have vilified sugar, I think, but it is still in everything. But natural sugars are still good. We still need to have them. Like what you find in your fruits and your vegetables, you still need to have those, right?
So the one biggest thing is I always tell people sugar is sugar, no matter what form it is, whether it's, you table sugar or fruit sugar, right? Your body doesn't know the difference, right?
Oh, okay.
The biggest difference regarding the grand scheme of things is if you consume a whole fruit, you have fiber, you have nutrients, right?
Right. Yeah.
Sugar in itself is just a macro. There's not a lot in there regarding macro and micronutrients. But when you take a fruit, you have some fiber, a gram or two of fiber. You've got all the essential vitamins and minerals in there, right?
Right. Yes.
It's the biggest focus, obviously, the density of things, right? But an apple and a tablespoon of sugar might have 15 grams of sugar in it. They're going to have the same amount of sugar.
Okay.
It's just
Okay.
there's other things that may negate how much that sugar is absorbed. But I also tell people it's really in the combination of proteins and fats in the meal as well. If you don't have those added to a meal, you don't decrease the release of sugar into the bloodstream. You just have this big old spike of sugar, which the body produces insulin naturally. But over time, if we become more insulin dependent, where we have to make more of it all the time, we do have resistance at times and we potentially lead to diabetes. Right? Sugar in
Right.
itself won't create diabetes. It's a long-term concern where things just continue to be in a stress state. But yeah, you bring up a good point that people will put honey on things. They'll use agave nectar, but most of the times those things are still treated like sugar. I always tell people they're the same
Yes.
thing.
I was asking about that the other day. I was asking someone because I thought I was much better off if I use maple syrup or honey or agave. And they said, no, your body's still going to spike just the same. I was like, oh, shoot.
Yeah,
Stevia, though,
stevia
because
has a
stevia is
non-nutritive.
natural.
Yeah, it's non-nutritive. So there really is nothing that stevia will do. So stevia is a good option.
Okay.
And I'm seeing a lot of products out there. So I went to the store and I was with my daughter and she's 8 and we were looking at sugar content. And I don't really push looking at labels much with my children, but I just told her, I said, there's a lot of added things that maybe we don't need in excess at times, right? And sugar is one of those things that is added to a lot of kids' drinks, a lot of drinks in general. So we looked at the backs of the labels. We kind of looked at some things, and they are starting to make more children's products with stevia in them. So
Huh. Interesting.
there's a shift, right? We're seeing less added sugars, but yeah. But then, as I said, it's adapting and changing to that too, because stevia in itself has a very strong flavor. So you've got to adapt. So if you're switching
You
it
do.
out, you've got to get used. If you're into baking and you swap out sugar for stevia, it takes some adjustments.
What I did for a while there is I went with no extra sugar. I had, fruits and vegetables and things like that. And then I started adding a little bit of stevia and it didn't affect me. But before I just kind of completely cut it out, I was like, ugh. But now I like it and I don't mind it and I don't notice that it's in there anymore. So
You get used to it, right?
you do
You have to
get
adapt the
used to it.
taste buds to those things.
Yes. I want to ask you one more question because this is one that I really need to know too. I have a very busy schedule. I know you have a busy schedule. How in the world are we supposed to adapt to that and still eat well?
One thing I do with most people is a term I call I'm sure people know what it is. It's called time blocking. Like the biggest thing is having a time, or whether it's 10 minutes, an hour, or whatever you can get to focusing on your health. It's very important to take that time and say, hey, what great things did I do this past week to improve my health? If that's one of my goals, right? If my goal is to improve my health, what have I done great to improve my health? What were some barriers and what can I do to address those barriers, right? The biggest thing is we're so busy, right? We never have time
Right.
to sit down and reflect and say, hey, and I always tell people reflect on the great things, right? Because if we focus on the dread, all we're going to think about is the dread. So the biggest thing
Yeah.
is reflecting on all the good things we're doing, building off those, finding areas that we can improve upon. That's very important when it comes to overall health. So, I mean, I think you've got to make the time, but it does require the habit of making time. So if you don't have a habit of doing it, set an alarm clock, set a timer, set a day. Even if you have children, the children got to be in front of a TV for an hour for you to focus on yourself. That's okay. You've
Yeah.
got to obviously
Yes.
do those things because we've become so busy. There's no single earner household anymore. It's dual income. Everybody's working. Everybody's busy. But busy professionals can take the time to kind of focus on things.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they have the means to get food from someone that provides like macronutrient-based meals, they could do those things,
And
right?
they're out there. Those are out
Yeah.
there. They're just expensive.
And that's the thing is some people are busy and don't have the income, right? They're supporting a bunch of children, they want their kids to have everything in the world. And I'm one of those people. My paychecks, most of what I get goes to my children. At the end of the day, I'm dedicating my time for my family to make sure that they have what they need. But I have an hour every morning. I focus on my overall health and well-being because it's important to me. Otherwise, I'm not there for them.
Yeah. And you had mentioned something before we started recording that I thought was really important. We are in an age where people are saying, oh, you must have organic, you must have organic. And you said, not everyone can afford organic. Just get the fruits and the vegetables that you can afford, and live the best way that you can. And so I think that that's very important too, is to not just make the time, but hey, if you can't do it all right now, do the best that you can. Get those fruits, get those vegetables, shop the perimeter of the
Hmm.
store, not the center where everything's processed. And I think we'll end up living better. So, well, Devin, thank you so much for coming. I
Of
really
course.
want to have you for another podcast so that we can talk about how the diet affects our people living with dementia. And so we'll have to have you back on for another time because we didn't even get to address that. But thanks so much for coming. If you haven't liked our podcast yet, I would love it if you would subscribe, like this particular show, and share it with those that are in your life. You never know who might need the information. Thanks so much, Devin.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.